Ah, fools, they really thought music. They were pulling off precision work, didn't they? Mapping out strategies, whispering names, drawing music, little circles around you like hunters, studying a creature they believed music understood. But the funniest part, the darkest comedy of all, is how music, they miscalculated the basics. They dug a grave, drew the blueprint, music marked the spot, and then stepped right into it like tourists following a broken map. Not because you outplayed them, music, loudly. Not because you exerted any force, but because they never bothered to confirm who the grave music was actually for. That one missing checkpoint, that one skipped verification, that one incorrect music coordinate. That's the fracture that swallowed them whole, and people are finally seeing it. Music, aren't they? The numbers, the patterns, the sudden shift in behavior. Everyone is running music calculations now, whispering to themselves, how did this flip so badly? How did the target become the one holding the advantage? Because music, that's what happens when arrogance becomes navigation. They followed their own music confidence like a GPS that hadn't been updated in years. Music, marching proudly into a pit they dug for someone whose survival instinct is. Music sharper than their entire collective mindset. They never questioned it because they were too intoxicated music by the fantasy of your downfall. They couldn't resist the temptation, music, to imagine you buried, forgotten, erased. That temptation, music, became their compass, and compasses built on ego never point north. You, music, on the other hand, watch the entire operation unfold with the kind of calm that unsettles environments. You didn't, music, intervene. You didn't argue. You didn't warn them. You simply observed the music excavation, their tools, their haste, their blind spots. Music thought, music constructing an ending. They didn't realize they were constructing evidence, and you, music, let them. Because what's more poetic than watching someone dig their own undoing while music humming victory tunes under their breath? People underestimate how dangerous music misinterpretation can be. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the subtle, everyday misreadings that snowball into catastrophe. They misread, music misread your patience, misread your restraint, misread your quiet forward music movement as vulnerability. They designed the grave for the version of you they invented in their heads, not the version music standing right in front of them. That version vanished a long time ago. It's almost adorable if you think about it. Going to war with a memory and hoping music to win. The grave wasn't supposed to be symbolic. They meant music, it to be final, a burial site for your character, your credibility, music, your influence, your trajectory. They wanted an irreversible outcome, and they put music in the work, didn't they? Digging deeper every time they felt a flicker of insecurity. Shoveling faster, music, whenever someone told them to leave you alone. Widening the hole whenever, music. They sensed you rising, convinced that if they kept going long enough, eventually you would fall into the very pit, music, they crafted. But here's what they never accounted for. Your music ability to step aside. You didn't fight them for the ground. You didn't argue for music, the space they tried to occupy. You let them stand exactly where their ego guided them. And now they're staring at the dirt walls around them, finally realizing they're not watching you fall. They're watching music themselves descend. The horror is not in the dirt. It's in the realization that they paved their own downfall, music, under the impression that they were paving yours. That's what has music, the streets whispering. That's why conversations sound different. That's why tension, music, rises whenever your name appears. Everyone is trying to figure out how the predators, music, became the prey without you lifting a single finger. Because the truth is, painfully, music, simple. Targeting you was a fatal error. Not because you retaliate music viciously. Not because you fight with chaos, but because you music understand leverage without needing theatrics. People forget how sharp, quiet intelligence really is. They think loud reactions indicate music dominance. They don't realize that true dominance doesn't need to announce itself. It sits, it waits, it studies music. And when the moment arrives, it reveals a blueprint so detailed that the opposition collapses, music, under the weight of their own misjudgments. They dug a grave because they assumed you were predictable, programmable, music, imitable, someone whose behavior they could anticipate with minimal music thought. They didn't understand that your mind is not built for linear traps. They didn't understand music, that your instincts do not move in straight lines. They didn't understand music, that you don't walk into pits. You evaluate them, you don't react to attacks. You document music them. You don't chase threats. You let them orbit until music they self-destruct. What they did understand too late is that you're music, not the one who panics. You're the one who watches their panic grow like a signal rising on a radar. You saw at the moment, music, their plans began to wobble. The moment their bravado started cracking, the moment their arrogance, music, shifted into uncertainty. They still performed confidence, music on the outside, of course. But confidence without direction is just performance, and the grave they dug became the stage for their final music act. People don't talk about how satisfying it is to watch someone realize they, music, miscalculated everything. Not out of malice, but out of clarity, out of witnessing the consequences of underestimating someone whose awareness, music, functions like a warning system. It's the kind of clarity that jolts entire music environments. You can feel the shift in the air when people go from mocking you, music, to studying you. You can sense the recalibration when they realize music, their assumptions were the real threat, not you. You can hear music, the tension in their voices when they ask indirect questions, attempting to, music, understand how you escaped a trap without ever stepping near it. The grave symbolizes their entire music strategy. Poorly measured, poorly executed, poorly aligned music with reality. They thought having numbers meant having advantage. They thought having followers, music, meant having control. But your strength was never in noise or numbers. It was inaccuracy, music, precision, intuition, reading patterns they didn't know they were broadcasting, interpreting music, movements they didn't know they were making, anticipating outcomes they didn't believe you were capable of predicting. They didn't check the coordinates, didn't verify music, the target, didn't cross-examine the narrative. They built a plan around their own hallucinations, music. And when people build based on illusions, the collapse becomes inevitable. not as a destiny, but as a mathematical certainty. That's why everyone's doing music the math now. That's why they're analyzing every misstep. That's why they're music, revisiting old conversations, trying to find the moment they veered off the correct path. But there wasn't just one moment. It was a music chain. Tiny errors, tiny ego boosts, tiny oversights that compounded music until the grave became unavoidable. It's comedic in the darkest way. A group, music, of people so determined to bury someone that they forgot to look where they were standing. They lost track of the plot, lost track music of their position, lost track of who was leading and who was following. And by the time they looked up, music, the ground beneath them had already shifted. Your restraint played a bigger role than they realize. Music, expected retaliation. They expected impulsive reactions. Music, they expected you to walk exactly where they wanted you to walk. But music, restraint, is its own brand of warfare. It gives people the illusion of victory. It convinces them they're winning. It feeds their music, convinces them, quote, you let them believe they were succeeding because belief was the rope they needed to hang music entire plan. And now the spectators, the friends, the associates, the witnesses, music, the background observers, they're adjusting their perception, not because you music changed anything, but because the evidence became too loud to ignore. People love music, a good downfall, but they love an unexpected reversal even more, and nothing reverses music harder than a trap collapsing on its architects. Your name carries a different weight, music, now. Not because you're intimidating, but because you embody unpredictability. They tried music to end you, but they ended their credibility. They tried to bury you, but they buried music, their alliances. They tried to target you, but they targeted their own standing. That's music, the fatal error, not the attempt. Everyone gets music targeted at some point. The error was assuming you couldn't respond without responding. Music. Assuming you couldn't rise without pushing. Assuming you couldn't win. Music. Without fighting. You didn't need to retaliate. You didn't music need to interfere. You didn't need to expose them. You just needed to move accurately while they moved. Music. Emotionally. Accuracy always wins. Emotion always digs holes. And they dug theirs with pride, with certainty, with music. Misguided superiority. Everyone's watching now, not with music curiosity, but with caution. They're studying the aftermath, music. They're reviewing the sequence. They're comparing notes to understand how the underdog became music, the one standing above the crater. And the answer is simple. You didn't fall into their trap, music, because you were never standing on their map. The grave is symbolic of every assumption, music they made, every weakness they projected onto you, every narrative, music they forced themselves to believe. And now that they're standing in it, knee-deep in the music, consequences of their own ambition, the only question left buzzing in their heads is, music, how did we misread everything? The answer unfolds naturally. They misread everything because they measured you, music, by their limitations, not your capacity. But what they're experiencing now, music, isn't confusion. It's a psychological earthquake. The kind that doesn't music shake buildings, it shakes identities. Because there's something terrifying, music about realizing the helpless one didn't just survive. They were never music in danger. That the person they thought they could corner wasn't even participating in the music confrontation. That the victim they planned to trap walked right past them while they were still drawing diagrams. Music. That realization hits harder than any retaliation could. It's not music, your strength, that scares them. It's their incompetence. Their entire operation depended on music, the assumption that you were predictable. They built their confidence on rehearsed conclusions. They followed each other's opinions. Music, like a breadcrumb trail to nowhere. They took music, their own fantasies, as factual evidence. And now they're reviewing those blueprints, music. Like detectives at a crime scene, realizing the fingerprints all belong to the investigators, not the music suspect. That's why everyone is doing the math now. Because the miscalculation, music, wasn't small, it was catastrophic. It wasn't one music wrong digit. It was the entire equation written upside down. See, they thought digging a grave was a linear process. Find soil, music, start digging, throw the dirt, prepare the site. Simple. But their simplicity, music, was the trap. They didn't realize graves have a unique nature. They don't care who music the intended occupant is. They only care about who falls in first. And while music, were so busy sculpting your downfall, they forgot one basic principle. Holes, music, don't discriminate. The ground doesn't care about intent. If you stand to music close, gravity will handle the rest, and gravity handled the music them with precision. What's particularly entertaining is how confidently they moved. They weren't hesitant. They weren't discreet. They didn't check coordinates. They didn't verify music terrain. They didn't confirm their target's trajectory. They were so eager to bury you that they practically sprinted music into the very pit they created. And the moment the realization hit that the architectural masterpiece music they designed is now their living space, you could feel the shift in the air. You could sense the tension. You could almost hear the soft, stunned internal music whisper. Wait, how did we end up down here? That's the music dark comedy of it all. They weren't pushed, they weren't tricked, they weren't lured. Music, they simply walked into it because arrogance told them the ground was music solid. Because ego told them you were stationary. Because delusion, music, told them graves only go one way. Music? And now they're standing in the dirt trying to pretend it's part of an unrelated situation. They want to believe the pit appeared out of nowhere. They want to, music, rewrite the sequence. They want to erase their footprints from the edge. But everyone around them sees the truth. They dug music, the hole. They climbed in, and then they tried to accuse the dirt of betrayal. People are whispering different now because music, the spectacle, is undeniable. Watching you rise wasn't the music surprise. Watching them plummet was. People assumed you'd survive. They didn't expect the architect's music of your downfall to become the casualties of their own blueprint. The collapse wasn't loud. It was embarrassing. Music. A slow slide rather than a dramatic fall. A realization creeping. Music. And like an unwelcome guest. We did this to ourselves. And that music sting burns deeper than any blow you could have delivered. You didn't swing, you didn't strike, Music, you didn't sabotage. You simply stepped aside and let their music momentum finish the job. And momentum fueled by arrogance has no brakes. That's what has them music trembling now, not you. Your restraint, your refusal, music to panic, your refusal to react, your refusal to join their chaos. They expected war and got observation. They prepared music for confrontation and got indifference. They anticipated counterattacks and got patience. Nothing unsettles a self-declared enemy faster, music, than realizing you don't see them as one. Now the entire environment feels it. That unease, that tension, that temperature, music shift when someone who plotted against you realizes their plan wasn't just flawed, it was suicidal. Because the moment they look at you now, they're not seeing music a target. They're seeing a mirror reflecting their miscalculations back at them. And that reflection, music, is humiliating. It forces them to acknowledge everything they avoided confronting. Music, their pettiness, their impulsiveness, their fantasy of superiority, their desire to control what they couldn't, music, comprehend. This is where the psychological chaos begins. Because when a person stands in a grave they dug, their first instinct isn't music to climb out. It's to deny the hole exists. They start music, blaming distractions, blaming circumstances, blaming each other. They reenact music, the sequence in their minds, and try to pinpoint the exact moment music, things went wrong. Unaware that the moment was the first shovel of dirt. The minute music, they decided to target you. The outcome was sealed, not by music, mystique, not by destiny, but by math. Simple, unforgiving math. You cannot defeat music, someone you mismeasure. You cannot trap someone you don't understand. You cannot bury music, someone who is not positioned where you imagine them to be. Every music move they made was guided by emotion. Every counter move you made was guided by clarity. They acted based music on fantasy. You responded based on observation. That's music, why they're stuck. That's why they're studying the ground beneath them like it's going to provide answers. That's why everyone, music, is calculating the same equation. How far off were we? And the answer, music, is catastrophically. They assumed the grave would bring closure. Instead, it exposed music, their entire mindset. The digging wasn't preparation. It was confession. Music, every shovel was an admission of insecurity. Every whispered music plan was an admission of inadequacy. Every attempt to corner you was an admission, music. They feared your growth. They weren't trying to bury you. They were trying to bury music, the possibility of being overshadowed by you. But fear-driven construction always collapses. They didn't check the coordinates because music, they didn't want truth. They wanted confirmation bias. They didn't want accuracy. They wanted validation. And validation is the most unreliable compass in existence. Music, it points wherever ego wants it to point regardless of the terrain. Now the terrain has swallowed them. Music. And the funniest part is how politely you stepped back to let it happen. They expected music, you to resist, expected you to panic, expected you to plead, but you didn't treat their music attack like a threat. You treated it like weather, something that passes music on its own as long as you move correctly. That non-reaction was your real counterattack, not loud, not theatrical, just effective. And now, as they stand, music in the grave, trying to look composed to the humiliation, you can see the cracks forming in music, real time. The forced calm, the stiff posture, the sudden politeness, the revised narratives, music, the desperate attempts to look like they're fine. They're not. They're drowning in the realization that they aimed at someone with a higher vantage music point than they anticipated. They swung upward, lost balance, music, and toppled forward straight into the pit. This is the stage where their psychology, music, stops being subtle and starts being theatrical. You can almost map their phases like a behavioral chart. First denial, then confusion. Music, then deflection, then panic, then the final stage. Realizing music can't climb out without acknowledging the whole exists, and that's the one thing they hate more than the fall itself. Admitting the fall wasn't music, an accident, that it wasn't caused by anyone but themselves, that their hands are covered in the music, same dirt they're now stuck in. They're trying so hard to regain control of the narrative. You can see it, music, in their posture. You can feel it in the way they avoid eye contact. You can sense it, music, in how carefully they speak. Now every word they choose is weighed, measured, filtered. They think music playing calm gives the illusion of stability. But stability doesn't need performance, only panic. Music does. And their panic is showing. They're calculating, but the math is music broken. They're reviewing, but the data is corrupted. They're holding conferences, music in their heads, trying to understand how the harmless one, music, became the tipping point that shattered their entire strategy. The dark humor here is that the grave wasn't even set well. Music, it wasn't cleverly executed. It wasn't a masterpiece. It was sloppy. Music, rushed, impulsive work built on wishful thinking. And yet they were so confident in it, so proud, so sure you'd fall for it, so sure they were steps ahead. Standing in music, the dirt now, they finally realized they were steps behind the entire time. Every environment has a moment, music, where the atmosphere changes, where people stop pretending they didn't notice the collapse. You can feel that shift now. Everyone around music them is reevaluating everything they once believed. People who once sided music with them quietly distance themselves. People who once ignored you now tilt music, their heads in curiosity. People who once doubted you suddenly start music, speaking your name with consideration. Not admiration yet, but caution. Respects music precursor, because this isn't just a downfall. They're witnessing a reversal. Music they didn't think was possible. Not because you performed a stunt, not because you exposed music anything, but because consequences came knocking without you having to lift the knocker. What they tried music to bury rose higher than the ground they fell into. And you know what unsettles them, music, most? It's not that they miscalculated. It's not that their plan failed. It's not even that people are music starting to see them differently. It's the realization that you saw everything, not just the music grave, not just the digging. You saw their motivations, their impulses, their insecurities, music, their projections, their jealousy masquerading as leadership, their pettiness, music, disguised as strategic concern. You saw right through music with them and chose not to confront them because confrontation would have given them validation. You gave them nothing, not music, your reaction, not your fear, not your participation. And nothing music humiliates someone more than realizing the person they tried to destroy wasn't even emotionally involved enough to respond. Now they're trapped in a double bind. Stay in music, the grave, and accept the humiliation. Climb out of the music grave and expose the climb. Either way, they lose. They want to music. Pretend they're analyzing the whole, not trapped in it. They want to frame this as a music temporary setback. Something that just happened, as if dirt jumps up and surrounds people randomly. But the observers see through music, that performance, instantly. Observers are not fools. They know when someone is music, standing in a pit of their own making. And they talk, they whisper, they calculate, they connect, music, dots. Every onlooker is doing the math now, and the numbers consistently point to the same music outcome. Targeting you was the fatal error, not a poor choice, music, not a mistake, a fatal error. A miscalculation so severe it cost them their footing, their credibility, music, their mask, and their position. Fatal errors are interesting. Music, not because they're loud, but because they carry consequences that cannot be reversed. A trap can be music reset. A plan can be revised. But a fatal error leaves an imprint on reputations, and reputations, music, rarely regenerate. Now they're trying to assess how much damage control is possible. They make subtle music changes. Tone softens, shoulders lower, voices slow, phrases become gentler. They think these small adjustments, music, phrasers become gentler. They think these small adjustments, music, hide the fracture. They don't. They're transparent. Transparent like music, trying to sweep dirt while still standing knee-deep in it. They're also trying to rewrite the past, reframing their hostility, music as concern, reframing their sabotage as misunderstanding, reframing their sabotage as misunderstanding, reframing their mockery, music, as miscommunication. But rewriting doesn't work when everyone saw the original script unfold live. People remember music, the tone. People remember the posture. People remember who carried music, the shovel, and who stood on the sidelines. This is where their panic becomes organized, not outward. Music panic, internal panic. The kind that shows up in glances, hesitations, and music, that tiny pause before answering anything involving your name. Because now your name isn't a trigger for music, their confidence. It's a trigger for their regret. Not loud music, regret. Not loud music, quiet regret. Regret that echoes in the mind late at night, questioning the wisdom, music, of digging holes in the first place. It's dawning on them that the grave was never music, a strategy. It was a confession disguised as preparation. Every shovel, music wasn't an attack on you. It was a reflection of their fear about you. Their desperation to contain something they couldn't music measure. Their hunger to control what wasn't theirs to control. Their urge to bury what music made them uncomfortable. They didn't dig to end you. They dug music because they couldn't handle the idea of you continuing. That's why music, they're so shaken now. Because not only are you still here, you're standing on ground far more music stable than theirs. Not because you pushed them, but because they walked music backward into a hole while trying to intimidate you. That's the kind of irony that music stings for years, and the environment feels different now. It's not the music's same space it was before they dug anything. People navigate differently. Music speak differently. People look at you differently. They're not music analyzing you. They're analyzing themselves in relation to you. Because when someone music walks into a grave they dug for someone else, every witness stops and reevaluates music where they stand. Some of them fear being next to dig. Some of them fear being associated music with the diggers. Some of them fear being caught observing. And some of music, them very quietly fear ever underestimating you again. Now the air around them carries a pressure they can't name. The ground music beneath them feels like a reminder. The memory of the dug grave sticks to them like dust they can't wipe off. Every time they try to reassert confidence, the image, music, flashes back. Them standing proudly with the shovel, unaware of the music, GPS failure. That humiliation becomes a permanent watermark, music, and across their psyche in the dark humor. They still think music no one noticed. They still believe their little performance is working. They're convinced that if they music stand still long enough, people will forget they're in a pit. But that's music, not how this works. You can't pretend your way out of a hole you dug. You can't posture music your way back to level ground. You can't rebrand a collapse. And you definitely, music, can't bury someone who learned to read maps while you refuse to check coordinates. This is why the music environment isn't laughing. They're calculating. They're realizing that if someone like you could avoid a collective trap effortlessly, then maybe you're not just music resilient. Maybe you're someone whose perception outmatches the strategies thrown at you. Maybe the real threat wasn't music, their plan. It was your awareness. And now that awareness is unmistakable, unavoidable, unedited. The grave music they dug is no longer a threat. It's evidence. And the deeper music their regret sinks, the deeper the realization hits. You didn't outsmart music them. You simply didn't join them. And that truth terrifies them on a level they, music, didn't prepare for. Because there's a different kind of psychological damage that music happens when people realize their enemy wasn't even trying. They thought they were engaged. Music in a game, a rivalry, a campaign. They imagine themselves as masterminds, music, navigating complexity. They envision themselves as strategists organizing an attack, music. Meanwhile, you weren't even on the battlefield. You weren't countering. You weren't defending, music. You weren't retaliating. You were simply observing from a vantage point they didn't know existed. And when someone, music, realizes they weren't beaten by resistance, they were beaten by their own momentum. It hits music differently. It hits like a mirror they can't avoid. Now the ground beneath them feels like proof. Every grain, Music of dirt touching their shoes reminds them of the miscalculation. They feel it. Music when they walk. They feel it when they talk. They feel it when they talk. They feel it every time your name enters the conversation. They feel the weight, music of the grave. Not physically, but psychologically, like a time. Music, stamp, marking the moment. Everything they assumed about you collapsed. And now they're stuck, music in a loop, trying to understand how the person they dismissed so confidently, music, ended up miles ahead while they ended up in a hole. That's the kind of realization that rearranges hierarchies. Music, the kind that forces people to re-evaluate themselves, the kind that makes observers shift. Music, their loyalty, adjust their posture, rethink their assumptions. Because when a trap flips on its creators, music, everyone learns something. Intent doesn't equal accuracy, and confidence doesn't equal music intelligence, and loudness doesn't equal leadership, and digging music a grave doesn't make you an undertaker. It just makes you someone holding a shovel. The irony, music keeps growing because the more they try to escape the humiliation, the deeper music they sink into it. Their attempts to distance themselves from the collapse expose them even more. They avoid your music presence now, not because they fear confrontation, but because they fear reflection. Looking at you, music, forces them to confront the truth. They didn't lose a battle, they lost music, their own narrative. Their identity depended on believing they controlled the situation. Music, that belief was their guide, their internal GPS. And that GPS, music, was broken from the beginning. And the funniest part, they never checked music for updates. They navigated using outdated assumptions. They routed their strategies around misread music versions of you. They followed coordinates based on rumor, projection, insecurity, music, envy. They trusted their internal compass more than music, the external reality. And now, standing knee-deep in the grave, their biggest fear, music, isn't being stuck. It's being seen stuck. They know everyone's observing. Music, they know calculations are being made. They know the narrative is shifted. They know the spotlight is no longer music flattering. It's exposing. They thought digging a grave gave them control over your trajectory. Instead, it revealed theirs. They believed creating a music downfall for someone else automatically elevated them. Instead, it revealed music, how low their standards actually were. They believed targeting you would send a message. It did. The opposite, music won, because the only message people see now is this. Music. If you try to bury someone who was never beneath you, you end up burying yourself. Their faces, music, reveal everything. The tight jaw, the strained posture, the forced calm, the awkward smiles. Music, the quiet tone, the sudden humility. These aren't traits of confidence. They're symptoms of music collapse. They're symptoms of people trying to maintain dignity inside a situation that music stripped it away. They're symptoms of individuals realizing their plan didn't just fail, it inverted. Your name has become a reminder of that inversion. And as the days, music pass, the grave doesn't shrink. It grows, music, insignificance. It becomes the metaphor people bring up in private conversations. It becomes the cautionary tale, music, whispered behind closed doors. It becomes the example used to warn others about miscalculating music, their targets. People who once underestimated you are now studying you, not to attack, but to understand. Music, because they finally learned that you're not reactive. You're music predictive. You don't rush. You don't panic. You don't operate on impulse. Music, you move when necessary and remain still when unnecessary. That stillness is music, what made their collapse so seamless. Now comes the phase they feared most. Accountability by environment, not forced accountability. Music. Organic accountability, the kind that breeds itself without effort. People are asking music questions not loudly, quietly, strategically. Questions like, how did they miss the signs and why were they so confident and how did they misread someone? Music so thoroughly. The environment has shifted into analyst music mode. And analysts don't rely on fantasy, they rely on patterns, and the pattern music is clear. They dug the grave, they didn't check the GPS, they walked into it, and you kept walking forward. This is the moment where people start seeing you through music, a different lens, not as someone who survived sabotage, but as someone who music transcended it. Not as someone who won a conflict, but as someone who invalidated music, the conflict before it even began. People realize you didn't override the trap. You rendered it irrelevant. Music, you didn't avoid danger. You stood so far outside it that danger never music reached your coordinates. That kind of awareness creates a ripple effect, a shift in hierarchy, a recalibration music of how people measure you. And that recalibration creates fear. Not fear of music, you harming them. Fear of them misjudging you. Fear of them misjudging you. Fear of repeating the same mistake that buried the first group. Fear of digging any music hole without checking the GPS twice, 3 times, 10 times. Music. Fear of even positioning themselves near conflict involving you because they've music learned how that story ends. Not with your downfall, but with someone else falling, music, backward into their own excavation. And this fear does something powerful. It cleans music, the environment. It filters out reckless behavior. It forces people to think before they act. You didn't demand music respect. You created conditions where disrespect destroys itself. You didn't chase music validation. You existed so accurately that invalidation became music a hazard for the invalidators. But the ones still standing in the grave feel the shift more intensely. Music. They're suffocating in self-awareness. They're drowning in analysis. They can't escape the math because the math doesn't lie. The conclusion is everywhere they look. They targeted you, and that decision. Music is now the anchor tied to their reputation. They know the environment sees it. They know they can't, music, salvage the narrative. They know the grave is part of their identity now, and the psychological gravity of that realization pulls them, music, downward. Their confidence falters, their certainty crumbles. Their internal monologues turn, music, hostile, not toward you, toward themselves. They replay music the moment they picked up the shovel. They replay the moment they spoke your name with arrogance. They replay music the moment they assumed they understood you. They relive each decision as a regret. Music, each assumption as a failure. each action as a stepping stone into the pit. People talk about downfall like it's an event. It's not. It's a process. Slow, revealing, music, unforgiving. And they're in the middle of that process right now. Each day, music sinking a little deeper into the consequences they built with their own hands. The grave hasn't closed on music them physically, but psychologically. They're already under the dirt. That's why their faces, music, look different. Why their tone shifted. Why their posture, music, deflated. Why? Their confidence evaporated. Because they finally understand the truth. You were not the one being hunted. You were the one watching music. The hunters lose their direction. The coordinates were wrong. Their assumptions were wrong. Their timing was wrong. Music, their target, was wrong. Everything was wrong except music, the hole they dug. That part was accurate. Well constructed even. Music. They just didn't anticipate being the ones standing inside it. And now the environment uses music them as the example of what happens when arrogance replaces intelligence. When assumptions, music, replace strategy. When ego replaces accuracy. When someone, music, thinks drawing a map means they control the territory. This is the part they didn't expect. You never needed music, revenge. You never needed retaliation. You never needed to bury them. All you needed was music, truth, and truth did the burying for you. Truth always does, because truth, music, doesn't shout, doesn't push, doesn't fight. Truth, music stands still and lets lies fall under their own weight. This is why people treat music you differently. Now with deliberation, with calculation, with respect, music disguised as caution